Hello and welcome to this presentation on collaborating for test success, insight from a successful informal science collaborative. Uh, the idea behind this presentation was it would be something that individuals or groups that are trying to work together in a collaborative would have some sort of basis for beginning their collaborative, specifically as it related to focusing on improving standardized test scores, but the lessons learned here can be applicable to anyone working in a collaborative arena as it pertains to formal and informal science organizations. This is a presentation based on an actual piece of research that I conducted recently, and the reason I chose this format and this particular informal organization is based on 30 years of experience running, working with, studying collaboratives. I felt like this was a good one to use as a platform to begin to have the discussion on collaboration. Collaboration seems easy, but it really does have a skill set. There are some structural elements, processes in place, cultures that have to be created. In some ways, it's kind of an art form. I think the arena between formal and informal science educators is primed and ready for this, and I think there's a little bit of a lack of appreciation in many cases for what each other does. Maybe it's not a lack of appreciation, but it's just simply awareness, and so there's an effort underway to increase more collaboration, and this is a opportunity to put a little presentation together that might provide some insight and a leg up on some things that I've had to learn over 30 years. So as we begin, I want to start first with the reason why formals and informals should look at working together. It has to do with constructivist theory, and that theory is basically we learn, and especially we learn our abstract knowledge, abstract concepts based on tying them to concrete experiences, and what better place to get actual concrete experiences than in the informal arena. And when I talk about informal arena, it can range anywhere from clubs such as robotics clubs, but also leaning more in this presentation towards those museums and nature centers and science labs, any of those things that you see out there that are actually bigger than life sometimes for these kids, that create these big experiences that you can't really create back in the classroom, that can form those concrete experiences that are foundational for going back into the formal classroom and building the abstract thought around with whatever scaffolding the pedagogy in place applies. Now, we looked at an outdoor education program at a camp called Sky Ranch, and the reason that this was the site selected for the study, because with some background studies, we're particularly interested in the impact on test performance. The reality is we can debate all we want to about the value of a test, whether we should be testing, but the reality for at least our public schools is in most cases they are bound by some sort of standardized test. In Texas it is called the STAR test, and basically any resources schools spend something, there better be something in there that has to do with improving on that test. And so what we look for is an example of an organization that had done that. We had heard that Sky Ranch had had an impact. It hadn't been documented. We did a little study, began to compare the STAR test scores from the schools that went to Sky Ranch to the state average, and found a 14% higher passing rate in the Sky Ranch schools. It was statistically significant. We also went back in and looked at an individual school, had a group come out before, or half their students come out before, half after the STAR test, and looked at the benchmark students who were the ones we expected to fail based on how they performed in a January test before the April STAR test. And of that group of students, 28% performed higher, or 28% higher passing rate with the kids who came out prior to the test. So there's evidence there that Sky Ranch is a program, is an informal experience that has had a positive impact on standardized test scores. So it was a good model for us to go in and begin to look at what is going on there in that test. So there was another study we're not going to talk about today, but I'll give you a quick overview on. We went in and began looking at the primary factors that were supporting that success. We came up with these 8, of which you see number 8 down there is collaboration. And when we really began digging into this, we realized that even though we have collaboration listed as number 8, the collaboration part of what was going on there between Skyranch and schools was actually driving a lot of these other factors that we have listed here. So with this study, we began digging in and looking at collaboration and how did that work so that others who would be interested in collaboration would have something to begin to build upon, and they would be building upon something that actually is grounded in evidence that it produced an improvement on test scores. A quick thing about the informal organization we were studying. There are many types of informal organizations. So it's kind of important to understand what this one was. It's located in East Texas, about an hour and a half east of Dallas. They process about 18,000 students a year from 180 school campuses. 85 of those are public 5th grade campuses. And in Texas, they test science in the 5th grade. So we're going to focus, of the 180 schools, we focused on the 85 that were 5th grade public schools. It's a 3-day, 2-night residential experience. So the kids come there and stay there overnight for 2 days. Well, 3 days and 2 nights. The content that they cover is they'll cover about 87 to 92% of the TEKS, which are the Texas standards, and they'll cover those in 12 contact hours of instruction. A little bit about the Skyranch instructors. They are college graduates, but they come from various disciplines. Very few have science background or even an education certification background. From that study, what we did is we looked into how the process worked. We did observations of collaborative meetings, interviews, and from that we came out with these key elements of Skyranch and this collaborating schools relationship. And these, we divided them up into process elements and culture elements. And this is really where the meat of this presentation is, and we'll go through these individually, and I think these are applicable to any collaboration. So first and foremost, collaborative meetings are the primary driver of the program. They invest time in meeting and talking to their schools talking to them. Their meetings last about an hour and a half. They meet twice a week, but don't worry, I'll get to what that meeting is in just a minute. I'm not suggesting that everybody has meet in their collaboratives twice a week for an hour and a half. One of the things they do is kind of unique. But it's very clear that that's a working space, and they go to work and are everything that happens in the program is coming through those meetings. So that is one thing to know, is you need to devote time to sitting down and meeting. So they have what I call a singular composite relationship between Skyranch and their schools. And what I mean by that is schools come in on Monday and leave on Wednesdays, and a whole other group of schools will come in on Wednesday and leave on Friday. And so every Wednesday, the outgoing schools, Skyranch meets with those teachers for about an hour and a half. And every Friday, those schools that were there at the end of the week, Skyranch meets with those teachers and administrators for about an hour and a half. The next week, different group of people come in on Monday. Skyranch meets with them on Wednesday. Different group of people come in on Wednesday. Skyranch meets on Friday. And it's this ongoing collaborative meeting. And that's one of the ways that they work. And it gives them a lot of depth of information because they're working with all of their schools. But it's a singular composite relationship. There is a specific process in place that's driving that collaborative. When you sit in on the meetings, it's very easy to see. You pick up on it really quick. There's a routine that they go through, and it will begin, they'll sit and begin talking about each individual class that they take, and they have a process. How did it go? Clarifying questions. The Skyranch leads the meeting, and they will dig in even deeper, but they'll work through a class, then they'll go into the next one, then they'll move to the dining hall. How do things go there? Then how do things go at the in the cabins? But there is a process, and everybody seems to be aware of the process as they move forward. So you're going to want to make sure you have a process in place. Their relationship was very obvious, was based on serving the needs of both entities. And this is very important to understand when you go into a collaborative relationship. You want to be very clear with each other and be open with each other. What is it you need? Schools in this case, they wanted they need to perform well on a test. They want a outdoor experience for their kids. They want them to have fun. They want them to be safe. Sky Ranch was very open. They want to have a good learning experience. They want them to learn about nature. They want them to have fun. They operate, their revenue comes off of this, so they know that they need to generate revenue. They were very clear. But everyone in the collaborative needs to, first and foremost, what do you need out of this relationship? And then everybody needs to be committed to serving everybody's needs and trying to make sure whatever's happening, needs are being met. They take a holistic approach to evaluate the entire experience. And what I mean by that is they look at everything. And this is something that a lot of times we overlook in the informal world. And we only look at things specifically from our content and our program and what we're doing. But what needs to be understood is when these schools come out to our places, they go through a lot to get there. And they're taking a risk. They're loading up kids, they're putting them on a bus, they're taking them out of school, they're having to deal with parents. There's a lot of risk there. And so one of the successes of this program is they consider the program not to be just when they arrive on the property or even just when they're sitting in the classes, but they are communicating in those collaborative meetings about pre-trip planning, what can be done to help the parents be better educated on what's going on back with their school, with their administrator. How is the scheduling going? What about arrivals? They are talking about every single element because Sky Ranch, obviously, they can understand what all goes into loading up a group of kids and bringing them out to a facility, and they respect that. And the conversations don't just center around the content. They are looking at every aspect of it, because when things go wrong, and it makes it more difficult on the school to come out to the facility, then the odds of that school continuing to come will go down. The process involves diverse perspectives solicited from both entities. It's obvious from the people that are in the meeting. It's not just one teacher. It's all the teachers that came. If there's an administrator there, the administrators are there. Some of the meetings, the school nurse was there. The other thing that was interesting is there was an obvious effort on both parts to gather input before they came to the meeting. And so during the conversations, things would come up from the teachers, from the school sides, how they had talked to parents, they had talked to kids, other teachers, they had input there. It was obvious from Sky Ranch's side that they came in prepared. They had been talking with their staff and had input. They knew of things that had gone on before they even got in the meeting and were able to address them. They got perspective from their instructors on how things were going. So it's important that the process involved diverse perspectives from both entities. The more information, the more perspective you can get on the relationship and what's going on, the stronger that you are. There was an obvious effort for continuous improvement. There was a cycle in place. It was obvious that the effort was meant to be a journey and not a destination. And there was patience with each other and how they moved forward. And they knew it was just going to be a slow process of continually getting better. When a issue would come up, when something had not gone according to plan, there wasn't panic and finger pointing. There was an effort to say, okay, what did we learn from that? How do we go forward? There were conversations where they would track history and say, okay, we did this, and then we did that, and then we did this. And you could see that the focus was on getting better, and it was a long process. You could also see that in the conversations at any one time, they were talking about different elements within an improvement cycle. At some point, they were talking about what just happened, how was the experience, how did that go. They would begin talking on another topic related to the trip about, hey, here's where we think we're going, what do you think about that? So there was a continual mentality and process in place where they were looking to continually be improving. There are some cultural things that have developed over time. It'll take some time with your collaborative to develop this, but it's good going in knowing that these are things that you should be shooting for. And one of those was there was a high degree of trust between the two entities. And this is most easily seen whenever you would have a new school in the room along with some of the veteran schools, and the new school would have a concern or bring up an issue, and Sky Ranch would begin to address it, and the veteran schools would chime in and basically reassure the new school that Sky Ranch would handle this and would hear them and was listening to them because of their experience. And so there's a high degree of trust that they're working together. That high degree of trust was based on past history of the collaborative. It shapes the level of trust. One of the comments from one of the teachers that we interviewed was, Sky Ranch says what they're going to do, and they do it. And so that past history can shape your trust, and so that's very important for everybody to understand. If you say you're going to do it, and if for some reason you can't do it, just be open and say, hey, here's what went on, here's what we're trying to do. Everything that happened wasn't always perfect, but it was obvious that they were had open and honest with each other, and the effort was there. But it's going to take time to build that. This was a mature collaboration of about 10 years. Both entities share responsibility for the program's success. If this is a true collaborative, everybody owns everything. And this was really obvious. For example, there was a situation where one of the classes was cut short, and different groups who went through the classes didn't get the same experience. They had different content was taught because they didn't have the full time allocated to teach it. And that was brought up, but the school that brought it up quickly said, hey, part of that was our fault because we were late getting there, and which created less amount of time, and they weren't able to get all the content in. And Sky Ranch, on the other hand, jumped in and took their share of the responsibility and said, you're right, you were late, but we should have got together before we went and agreed on what we were going to cut so that all the content that was delivered across the different classes was the same, so that all the kids heard the same thing, so that the schools would know how to build on that when they went back. So that's just one example about sharing responsibility. You need to share that as you go through if it's a true collaborative. Another part of their culture is creativity and innovation. It's not only encouraged, it's embraced and sought after. The reason you're going to partner with an informal organization is because they can do things that really can't be done back in the classroom. Creativity and innovation should be key. They don't just sit down and say, the informal organization say, here's what I do. Basically, they sit around and they talk about, well, what needs to be taught? Here's a certain standard. What can we do better on? And they talk about what's the best possible way for that informal to deliver that. And in some cases, it may mean they create something totally new and different. But it was obvious in the meetings that they would deviate and do a lot of brainstorming on some things as they sort of dreamed, but then they would move forward and put those dreams into play. I mentioned they would deviate. Flexibility is a common core value, and process in place will give way to the most pressing collective issue. There is a routine that they go into, but as I watched various collaborative meetings occur, I did notice that there was flexibility to move out of the routine and to deal with a pressing issue. Sometimes it was a pressing issue that the Sky Ranch knew about coming in, something had gone on that needed to be dealt with, and rather than start the meeting as normal, they would go straight at that issue and resolve it, and not allow that to be sitting in the back of the minds of any of the members that were there because of some specific incident that had happened during the trip. The other times I would see them is at one point, for example, there was a discussion about a change that could possibly be coming in the TEKS, and they would begin to brainstorm some different ways that might be taught and what they might could do. And so they were okay with allowing less information to come out about that specific trip on that particular meeting, and valued the opportunity to brainstorm a little bit. But then they would come back and get back to business. That was the typical structure of the meeting. I will conclude this presentation first by speaking to any formal educators that may be listening to this presentation. The informal community brings resources to the table that you simply just can't bring to your classroom. These images here on the slide represent just the wow factor, the sense of wonderment that the kids see when they go and participate in the resources that are at in these informal experiences. It creates an emotional response, and one of the things we've learned through research is anytime you can create an emotional response with a child, whatever they're learning gets embedded much deeper. They're more engaged. So these resources are out there. Please engage them and put the effort into it. I also want to speak to our informals and address any fears that you may have about tailoring what you're doing, trying to address standardized testing. Really all you're doing is aligning what you're teaching with whatever standards the curriculum that the schools have, and developing what's the best way to teach that. What you bring to the table and the resources you have are going to make that give that teacher so much more ability to teach and to engage those students in what they're learning, that it's going to translate onto that test. So don't worry about the fear of accountability or teaching to the test, because you can still deliver a quality experience. Sky Ranch delivers as quality of an outdoor nature-based learning experience as anyone out there. Yet there's not one thing they do that's not addressing those 5th grade TEKS as they move through. It's quality science, it's quality outdoor nature education, yet at the same time they're addressing the TEKS. And let me also say that although Sky Ranch is unique, that they can zero in on a specific grade level like that. I work at a facility that we have to also serve the general public. This does not distract from that. What we do is we have our general public program, but then we pick and build collaborative partners with specific grade levels and say, what's something unique and specific we can do for you, and work with the same concept that you see here that Sky Ranch has done, and move forward so you can achieve both. I also want to point out there are organizations out there that you can be a part of and learn from. There are state level organizations such as in Texas, the Informal Science Educators Association, ISEA. There's also a national organization called CASE, the Center for the Advancement of Informal Science Education, and they will be happy to talk to you and be a resource to you. NSTA has gotten very involved now with the formal collaborative world, so you're going to see a lot more coming out in the arena of the NSTA offerings. So there are resources out there. So thank you for listening in on this presentation. I hope this helps you be successful in a collaborative. I have given you my contact information there. I'll be happy to talk with you. Any questions, there is my email there. I even gave you my personal cell number. I'll be happy to talk to you at any time. So thank you.